now we're coming to a really high-class table. Let me welcome on for the CEO Roundtable with the topic Leading the Way to the All Electric Society. Therefore, please come on stage. The president of CEO of STMicroelectronics, Jean-Marc Chery. A big applause for him. So the next who will join him is Jochen Hanebeck, President and CEO of Infineon Technology. Give him a hand. So let's welcome the third person on stage. It's the President and CEO of NXP Semiconductors, Kurt Sievers. Welcome. So, and last but not least, but this is also a fact, not a fun fact. Since 1998, this panel is here on electronica. But this had, and in this time, there were no women on this stage. And this is the first time now we have a woman on stage. Please welcome Barbara Bergmeier, Executive Director Industrials of JGN Land Rover. Let's welcome. So, and he told me before that he is really glad that he wanted to have a woman on stage right now. I'm not doing this job. This is a journalist colleague. So please welcome Joachim Hofer, the moderator of this panel and correspondent of the newspaper Handelsblatt.
Thanks very much. It's really funny that I'm the host of a panel talking about the All Electric Society because I came here by bicycle. And it wasn't an e-bike. Yeah, great to be back here. I still remember 4 years ago, I was on stage and there was no one in the auditorium. I was alone. That's only 4 years ago when we had the pandemic. Now it's full, so that's great. And I think we got loads of topics to discuss, and you probably aren't surprised that my first questions are around the current political affairs. But one thing, before we start, first we'll discuss here on the podium, and later you will have the opportunity to ask questions. But now, let's start. So 2 events are moving people in this country and probably all over the world, and certainly also many visitors to electronica. That is the outcome of the election in the United States and the collapse of the coalition government in Berlin, of course. And so probably Donald Trump's success could certainly have more impact on the chip industry than the new German government. So first of all, I'm wondering, how are you preparing for the change in America? And maybe Jean-Marc Chery, you would like to start.
It's the usual question. First of all, we'll never comment, election or result of election. I think, we have to, let's say, execute our strategy. That is to be a broad-range leader in automotive and industrial market. And we have to adapt ourselves. Of course, I think we have to work all together to pass the message that too much set of constraints in fact, will put in jeopardy the innovation, because more money you spend to double the sourcing, to create a China for China, West for West, and then you cross everything, you consume engineering time. And it's much better to put our ambition and our energy on the challenge we have. Means electrification of the world, decarbonation of the industry, decarbonation of the mobility. So Congratulations to the new US president. This is the only comment I have to do.
Yeah, well, I know that you're not commenting on particular issues. We have to ask, right? This is our job. And I think we're curious to hear what Jochen Hanebeck is saying about that.
Yeah, look, there are two very important factors in the semiconductor industry. One is scale, and the other one is innovation speed. And all this, what we have observed in the past years of separating and localization, which we have to undertake, obviously, jeopardize somehow these two success factors. Scale, meaning we are coming from an area of truly global industry, supplying parts from wherever to wherever, and also developing innovations for the world. And the danger is that we will accelerate in this fragmentation, and the fragmentation happens on the supply side, and potentially with tariffs which are written on the wall will get worse. And but also on the innovation side, if you just, and that's fact, that's not guessing what's coming, but if you think about this Connected Vehicle Act, which the US has put together under the Biden administration, is also, in my mind, a dangerous track, because it leads to a tech stack applicable only for US, and potentially a tech stack for things like automated driving in China. And so it really goes against the success recipes of the semiconductor industry, what is happening. And other than that, we have to stay flexible and see what's really coming, because predictability is not necessarily the term that comes to my mind at first place.
So thank you. So, Kurt Sievers, you've probably got the biggest footprint of the companies involved here in the US. What is your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would start on a positive note here, because over the past probably 4 or 5 years, finally, probably all the democratic countries have woken up to the critical importance of semiconductors, which is great news. Had we spoken 6 to 8 years ago to politicians, be it in the US and admittedly also be it in Europe or Germany, they wouldn't even know how to spell semiconductors, nor had they any idea of the relevance of that industry for the whole value chain, which goes into big employment and big economic powers. So under the formation of the CHIPS Act over that period, including in the US, I think a significant positive shift has happened on the way to this electrified society, which is not bad. Now, the other thing is, every democratic government, I believe, will always try to make sure to drive the growth of its local industry. And that industry typically is our customers. I mean, we are serving, as a semiconductor industry, most of us here, the automotive industry, the industrial sectors, the compute sector, which is all about employment and economic growth. And I would continue to believe that every government will try to drive that, which is actually a good thing. The challenge is indeed what Jochen was speaking about, which is that the biggest friend of semiconductors is global scale. I think as an industry, we've been one of the biggest beneficiaries of globalization. And those more national-oriented policies are, of course, against that, which is then coming down to regionalization and all of these attempts to be independent. I would only forecast the one thing, Mr. Hover. There is no way any country in this world will ever be independent when it comes to semiconductors. It's just impossible. And if it was possible, it would become so expensive that no consumer could afford any device which uses chips. And I'm sure every government over time will understand that. Some take a little longer, others a little less long.
So we'll see how long it takes with the Trump administration. But Frau Bergmeier, how does this look like from the perspective of a car manufacturer?
Yes, thanks. Well, the US is a very, very important market to JLR, as you can imagine. So whatever changes will happen, we have to accommodate and we have to adapt accordingly. As an OEM, there is no other choice for us. If it comes to supply chain, and the most important thing has been, since a few years now, resilience in supply chain. So whatever extra effort we have to put in, whatever extra cost we have to put in, I only see is this more pressure on us to be still competitive, because I don't see any chance to pass this extra cost to the customer. So it means for us in manufacturing and supply chain, find more efficiencies. With other things we will discuss AI later, so I think we now need to move on and find efficiencies in order to compensate any extra cost if they occur.
So yeah, we'll come back to supply chains later on, but let us now take a brief look at Berlin and Mr. Hanebeck, as the head of a German company. You're certainly most affected by the upcoming change of government in Berlin. How do you view the events there?
Well, I really don't want to get into politics of the parties, but I think, or I hope that they take a wise approach on what needs to be agreed now, and things like the protection of the court, Verfassungsgericht, the Constitutional Court, thank you, sorry for that. The protection of the Constitutional Court, for example, I think is really worthwhile to work together. And there might be other things, and then let's go for election and let the electorate decide on the next government, especially in these times of global uncertainty. I think Germany needs desperately a strong government, and hopefully this government then creates clarity also on those aspects which is important for us in the business, clear boundary conditions, clear directions on topics like international trade, how Germany wants to position itself also in the European context, on energy prices, on migration, which will be required on the skilled side of things. So many topics awaiting clear directions, and then the business can work with it.
So Infineon did benefit from the last government. You received or receiving large subsidies. Are you worried that this will stop now?
No, I think there's a clear way and commitment on the two projects we are engaged with, and they are happening, and I think it's just a procedural topic to get to the final agreements.
Mr. Sievers, you're CEO of a Dutch company with a strong footprint in this country. Does NXP still feel at home in Germany?
Yes, we do. No, I really think most important is indeed speed and the capability to move again. I think we are living in such a fast-paced world where constant adaptation to the change is actually being ahead of the change would be the best thing. So a standstill, in my view, is the least good thing. So if only we go forward with an election soon, I think that's what we have to do. Now we will continue to feel well here, and again, this is not just about the chip industry in Germany, but it's about the whole downstream industry which we are serving, because I continue to believe that the capability which we have in Germany really stands on strong feet when we leverage the power of a deep value and supply chain, which we have inside the country. And that's the power of this country, but we have to keep moving in order to leverage that.
Monsieur Chery, what's your outsider's view on what is happening? I mean, you've had a new government in France recently. What do you think about what is happening here?
No, maybe I will explain to you why I do not comment. I do not comment because it's by respect to my employees. Because we have different sensitivity in employees, I cannot comment on my sensitivity. But as a CEO, I would like to say what we ask from any government left, center, right, whatever, is predictability. So we want that what we are doing, operation or business, is predictable. Stability or predictability in taxation. And we want the government very active at, let's say, international regulation or trade rules in order, we compete everybody with a fair rule. Well, as an example, the new taxonomy in Europe. Well, everybody, is really a major burden in terms of administration for European company. Well, we want whatever government, they are fighting at international level in order we fight with the same constraints and the same advantage. This is what we ask, to any government. So again, congratulations to the new government in Germany to come.
So predictability. Yeah, Frau Bergmeier, you're from Landshut, as you mentioned, but you're based in the UK. You're living in the UK, and there has been a swift change in government over the summer. How do you assess the events in Berlin from an outsider's view, and what would you like to see from the next government?
First of all, I'm headquartered in the UK, and we just had the experience of a change in government. And I'm a little bit with Jean-Marc. It's not my job to comment on these political developments, but what I would expect is really transparency, predictability, that we can plan. We can plan our business accordingly, and I think this is really key. The worst thing you can have is big surprises, because we plan our business, and if it comes to semiconductor contracts and others, for years. This is nothing we plan for a few months, right? So for us, it's really important to get no big surprises, and that's what I would expect.
Mm-hmm. So that would be a great change to the last government. We'll come back to politics later on. Now let's focus a bit more on, on your business. Maybe Jean-Marc is going to give more detailed answers then. When we're talking about electronics, and let's talk about the trends that are shaping your industry. And so I'd like to start with AI. And actually, today I was preparing an article I'm going to write about NVIDIA. They're publishing their numbers next week. Everybody will be talking about this company. And what I'm wondering is, what role can Europe play in this multi-billion-dollar market, and specifically, how are European companies benefiting from the AI boom? And so, what are your plans in this area? And maybe, Jean-Marc, you would like to start.
No, but as one gentleman said, you will have AI at any main node of the value chain. So, of course, you have in the cloud computing. Well, here, as ST, we participate to the various power stage from, let's say, utilities to the processor. And for sensor, power switches, power driver, and controller, there is really a great multi-billion business, that will come. Well, then the other node are what we say AI at the edge. Of course, inside microcontroller or standard microprocessor, AI, we consider AI as an enabler of business, not as a business, as a final business. It is an enabler. And of course, whatever is B2C or B2B, in any device or usage, you will have AI as a must. And clearly here, it's open a huge opportunity of business, including in sensing, because also in sensor, you will have some small, let's say, capability in terms of computing power, where you can have sensors with AI capability. So clearly, at each node, either we participate on the, let's say, power solution, or we participate to the digital solution at the edge. Well, then I am not spoken about how we use AI in various business processes or manufacturing or R&D processes in order to improve our productivity. That's the reason why, yes, AI is a must, and we will participate to it.
How's it in Infineon?
Yeah, we have inside Infineon, we are saying we power AI, we enable AI, and we use AI. Use AI obviously on the user side of things, enabling very much like what Jean-Marc said about getting AI to the edge where with advantages obviously in terms of efficiency, data privacy, and so on. Right now, the biggest opportunity is for us the powering AI. We will quadruple our revenue from last year within the next 2 years to 1 billion in terms of this powering AI from grid to core. Just a few numbers. Latest, let's take Grace Blackwell rack will consume 120 kilowatts with 70 GPUs. It's tremendous, and the growth is sky high. Why? Because if we are not solving the power topic of those racks, we will inhibit or delay or the compute performance increase. And that, I think, is the big motivation of all these players to find a way to increase their compute performance. And in order to do so, we need to increase power efficiency. And this we are doing with lots of solutions based on silicon carbide, based on gallium nitride, all the way from grid to core. And just another detail there, for those who are not that close, the core voltage is 0.5 volts of a processor roughly, and it consumes 1,400 watts. So easy equation is to get to the currents which are required in order to feed these processors. So huge opportunity for us, and we will write that and more tomorrow in our announcements.
Well, you could give us an idea what will be in your announcements tomorrow, just to we'll give you a close group now, right? All right, nice try. Sievers, how is it? Same story, but something to add for NXP?
Well, a lot to add. I mean, the way we look at this, and Gunter Kegel said this earlier, that every device which has any compute core will be AI enabled in future. More than half of NXP is about processors, microcontrollers or microprocessors. So think about 6-7 billion business which is in processing, and all of that will be going AI. Now, but it's a different AI than what you thought about with NVIDIA in the data centers. But what the data centers do is badly necessary, because this is where the large language models are running, which are then supplying dedicated AI to the specific edge applications. Now, you said a bit provokingly, I felt, like, what is Europe's role in this? I think it's fundamental. Europe is a lot about industrial manufacturing. That has always been the strength of Europe. And it is obvious that more than 10% of the manufacturing sector worldwide, and I would assume that's the same thing in Europe, is just lost because of unplanned downtime. Just to give you one example, it's unplanned factory downtime. And if only these manufacturing lines would be more intelligent and AI can help to drive that efficiency, there would be enormous gains in efficiency, and with that in profitability of all of these companies. So that is a great example where Europe will be greatly benefiting. Now, the point is that this is not something which will run in the cloud, because, and I guess everybody who runs a company here, Mr. Hartung, you will probably be a good example. You don't want your manufacturing data to be running in the cloud, because it is very sensitive data. It is your secret. Secondly, there is a lot of real-time requirements in these factories, where the latency between the factory and the data center in the cloud is just not fulfilling the requirement. So edge AI is going to be a very, very big deal because of latency requirements and because of privacy requirements. And everything we do here, including NXP, is about embedded processing in edge applications. So my vision of the future is we have now a wave of the first large language models running in data centers, and that is enabling edge AI as a second wave, which is very much in the center of our business.
So that means that in the future we'll see Europe more involved in AI than at the moment.
Well, I give you two answers to this. The one is I look at NXP as a global company. I mean, if we were only serving European customers, that wouldn't be enough. So it's of course a global, for us, it's a global approach. But clearly, if only European companies are agile enough and open enough to adopt AI into their processes, I think it will be great leverage into their global competitiveness. It's a big thing. So being open to this, I believe, is fundamentally important for the success of the European economy.
Mm-hmm. Frau Bergmeier, you're doing that? Or is the UK, would you consider it as European company?
I'm not going to ask this question as a German headquartered in the UK, sorry. So you need to find somebody else. If it comes to AI, I think, of course, we in JLR heavily use AI in manufacturing for optimizing, future structure. If it comes to quality information, also if it comes to maintenance, as you said, Kurt, to avoid longer downtimes, as have predictive information. But what has been my major focus in the last 2.5 years or 3 years nearly was how do I get more resilience in the supply chain? So when I first started, it was approximately 34 years ago in automotive. Everything was about best cost country and how does the value stream look the most competitive one. And this has now really changed. Everyone wants to have the most resilient value stream and supply chain. So, and we have been working in the last years also, for example, to use AI for risk monitoring. If it comes to, for example, geopolitical disasters, floodings, fires, whatever, if you have your data available in the supply chain, digital end-to-end, you can put some systems on it which help you within hours to find out which tier ones and tiers might be affected. And previously it took us days or weeks to go through the supply chain one by one. And this is, I think, a big benefit. And it helped us a lot. And also in the recent aluminum shortage around in Europe, you might all have heard, I think this was a big enabler to make us much faster than we used to be in the past in our supply chain work.
And may I just add one thing, because I feel always there is this strange hesitance relative to AI. Just one little, but I find very striking example. I think it was in the 80s where IBM developed this computer called the Deep Blue, which was the first computer which did beat a human being in chess playing. So the machine did beat Kasparov. In those days, that was a machine which was a couple of rooms in terms of compute size. We sell a chip today which has the same performance for about $4 or $5. That same performance, which can beat the best human being in chess playing, is now brought actually a thumbnail size, few dollars. If you imagine that to come into edge applications, which are all around us, I think this is actually a fantastic outlook. And that is what the European chip industry is enabling, because it will not be NVIDIA which is selling $5 chips into all of these ubiquitous applications. It is the European semiconductor companies which have the capability to do this. So I think it's a great deal. The one thing which we shouldn't forget is it will require a lot of software capability. And I hope that Europe is also offering the talent base to fill that pipeline of requirement when it comes to software capabilities.
I mean, NVIDIA is doing quite well with selling chips for 70,000 euros a piece, so there seems to be something right. But what I want to ask you is now that Europe is one of the world's pioneers in AI regulation. It's just like lots of fields we're very good in regulation. So is this helpful, or is it rather detrimental to companies in the EU? What do you think?
No, but AI already, as a company, you must be careful with your data, because again, you know that the power of AI is linked to data. It is that data that are enabling the performance of your AI capability. So already as a company, okay, you must be super careful and protective on your data in order to avoid, okay, to let's say spread secret of the company. So again, regulation is welcome as far as it enable European company to fairly compete with worldwide company. If it is yes, yes. If it is no, it is another set of constraints.
And how is it? Is it fair? Is it reasonable?
I let my colleague to answer.
Yes.
Thank you, Jean-Marc, very much. Well, look, it's understandable that certain things need to be regulated. The approach the EU took by an application view is at first hand maybe understandable, but the danger is built in that the regulation will never be quick enough to follow the technical advancements, especially with the setup that there is a European law which then needs to be broken down in national regulation, which in itself is the danger that we get a lot of diversity, which we do not want in that regard. And then even now, assuming that certain things need to be then finally decided in court cases. And if you think about that sequence, starting from the application point, which is in a way a good one, but this sequence will be take so much time, and the technical advancement will be so quick, it will, in my mind, never get into sync. And that's the danger. Again, understanding that certain things need to be regulated. The Americans take a very different approach on this, but again, we need predictability, we need clear ground rules, and we can work with that. But the danger is that if things turn the wrong way, that we will not have access to the latest models here in Europe, which would be a disaster.
Frau Bergmeier, it's easier for you, right? Because of Brexit. All the market forces have been unleashed in the UK, so you can use AI the way that is, I don't know, sensible, reasonable in your company, or how is it?
Yes, a lot has been said already from the two gents here. I think the predictability is really important, and it should be finally useful and helpful, but sometimes, of course, if it's an additional burden, that's what we are not so glad around this. But I think the thing is we have to follow the regulation, and hopefully the governments are smart enough and especially also predictable enough that it's finally not hindering us. I know it's a politically correct
but if there's no
answer,
Brussels
that's what
behind
you,
you, if it's just London, is it better than Brussels nowadays for you? Is it easier? Is there less regulation?
Actually, I'm head of industry, so it's not for me to judge these things. Maybe you ask our political affairs.
Yeah, I will.
Well, it's a fine line. I mean, some regulation might make sense, but personally, I find it sad that Europe is praising itself now to be the first with the AI regulation. I wished we could praise ourselves to be the first with AI innovation.
Yeah, so AI, that's for AI. Let's go, like the motto of this trade fair is, again, the path to an all-electric society. And now, looking at car sales in Europe, this path now seems to be rather bumpy. And so I'm personally wondering, is the transition to electromobility finally, taking longer than all of you have expected? Who wants to answer?
No, I think, we have to be very pragmatic in front of this electrification of mobility is a must-do. As any high-growing innovation in their path, there is some turbulence, and there is some period where, we are facing what we are facing today. And I can predict, maybe I am wrong, that on AI, we will see soon a similar path, that, it will not go as fast as predicted. Well, saying that, now we have to invest in a, let's say, solution that will enable electrical powertrain. We have to invest computing solution to optimize, let's say, this powertrain. I guess everybody is aware about battery passport. Battery passport is very important to know exactly what is the status of the battery. So there is many innovation to do in the electrical mobility. It's not because we are facing some difficulties in the short term that we will deny that it is a strong commitment of ST on electrification.
So it's not because of Jochen Hanebeck not using electric cars, because I saw him come in with an electric car. So you have to buy the cars now to get the right numbers. Infineon.
No. Look, I think in China, the path through e-mobility is clearly laid out very successfully. Today, new numbers were published, what they call NEV. More than 50% of the new cars sold, and I think we, especially Jean-Marc and myself, also participate in that trend very clearly in China. We help e-mobility to become true. In the Western world, very different. Here, of course, the regulator also plays a role, and we know there's big discussion about the combustion engine end in 2035. I would hope that the politicians finally come to the point that they set clear targets on CO2 reduction, and there's no debate that this is required. It's absolutely required if we want to keep this planet a place worthwhile living on. But the way how to achieve this CO2 reduction should be more open, and not by stating in 2035 no more combustion engine, because again China is showing us the way, right? NEV includes plug-in hybrids, and you can get in China long-range plug-in hybrids, 150, 180 kilometers, and that would be also the answer in my mind in many places like Europe, because people are concerned about range, they're concerned about charging infrastructure, and with long-range plug-in hybrids you could solve these two things. But no, we are going the way in Europe to say no more combustion engine, instead of saying we want to reduce CO2 in the traffic sector by X until year Y. So I think so regulation, again, predictability is important, but on the right level. Not too detailed, nevertheless achieving the needs of the society. I think at some point we will work that through, and then we will see also an acceleration again in Western countries on that path to e-mobility, maybe amended by long-range hybrids, maybe amended by hydrogen, and that's all. It's all good. It serves the same purpose. So I think we are in a transition phase, but the ultimate direction is still the same.
Have framework conditions been changed too often, if I understood you correctly?
Too often, but again, politicians should regulate things, and again, CO2 must be regulated, but on the right level, not by saying we need to do exactly this, but saying what is the ultimate goal. And the ultimate goal is, just like Mr. Kegel said before, a simple way of what is emitting CO2 the most, and to follow that approach, and not saying exactly by that year this needs to stop. I don't think that's helpful, because too many things are changing on the way.
Frau Bergmeier, what is your view as a car manufacturer?
Yes, so for JLR we are on track with our reimagined strategy, right? By 2030 we will have all our nameplates also electric. By then we will have spent 18 billion on our transformation from ICE to BEV. But I do believe that no one exactly knows how the transformation in the different markets and countries will go, how the customer adjust and adopt their behavior. So I believe that the most successful companies will be only the most flexible one while we transition. And it comes a little bit to your points as well. So my target is to not only have a flexible supply chain, but also flexible manufacturing while we transition. And if it comes to end dates, I don't know, I cannot predict exactly, but I can only tell you that the customers, they order what they want and not what we tell them what they need to order. So our ultimate goal is, while we transition and bring all our workforce, so we have trained, for example, nearly 30,000 people on electrification. This is a big job. You cannot change this every year. You need to follow your strategy, but in my view, keep as flexible and adaptable as possible in the ecosystem.
Sievers, are you continuing to invest heavily in electromobility, or are you taking now a more cautious approach?
We totally continue, because admittedly, I disagree with the observation, which is at the bottom of your starting question, that electrification of powertrains would be slowing. Totally not. It's a very German or Western perspective. If you look at the total car production this year, which is negative by 2%, electrified cars will grow by 20% in unit terms. And it will be more than a third of the global car production. So I'm not talking about a Mickey Mouse number, which is getting double the Mickey Mouse number, but we are above a third already. The point is only, most of that is happening in Asia and in China. But China, as a car market, is as big as Europe and the US together. So all of this debate about what is Germany doing and are they doing a few more on the eastern coast of the US, it actually doesn't move the needle. Our investment is tied to where the music is playing, and that is in China. It is growing, and it keeps growing, and I think that they do the technology, to your point, in a way that consumers embrace it, because it feels exciting. They want to buy these cars, and that's why, no, our investment absolutely continues. And I also think that in the Western world, by the way, it's just a moderation for a while, and it's going to pick up.
Does this make the country, China, more important for all of you?
Well, I cannot answer for all of us, but for us, for sure. And it's no secret, 35% of our business is to China. Half of it is China for China, so that remains in China. The other half, we think, is being re-exported. But the two key markets for NXP, so 75% of our business is automotive and industrial sector. And if we like it or not, but the automotive companies of China and the industrial companies of China are gaining globally in competitiveness. That's why the clear answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, similar for us. If you talk about e-mobility, if you talk about renewables, China is the lead market. That's a matter of fact, and that's why we are also pretty happy about our market position in China. We have a higher market share as the number one globally, but also in China, and our market share in China is for automotive higher than in Europe, and that's why we can compensate the slowing markets in the Western world, and also it's no longer that innovation only takes place in Europe, and in China we reuse. It's the other way around. We see more and more innovation to happen in China, and that should concern us from an industrial perspective, but that's what's happening as we speak.
But at the same time, when America and China are imposing export restrictions on each other, is this a problem for you?
No, but of course, is a set of constraints I have spoken, but for a company like ST, we have developed a China for China strategy since many years now on critical product and technology. But it is not for this set of constraints. As my colleague said, when you see the company on cars and on industrial, the speed of the development of a car now in China, I guess, is 18 months. So if you want to compete and to understand their mindset, their culture, how they innovate, I think we need to have all the value chain node in China, just to compete. Then, unfortunately, now there is all this exportation, importation constraints. Well, thanks God, now we have a silicon carbide in China, or very soon. We have microcontroller in China, we have sensor in China. So yes, we compete. But again, this is what I said during my first, let's say, point. More you put constraints on semiconductor company, which are key enabling technology, more you are taken the risk to put in jeopardy the innovation the world need.
Is it at the moment? Is it good to be from a European company if you want to make business in China? Is there any advantage over coming from America, or is this just a journalist's thought? How do you feel that?
Well, at least for us, I would say it isn't that much of a true advantage, because a lot of our IP is in the US and belongs to the US. We are manufacturing in the US, so it's so global that we will always have to comply with US export control regulations, which are going to China. However, exactly as Jean-Marc said, we will be manufacturing almost all of the product which we sell into China in China. And by the way, that sounds like a fierce requirement, but that's no different than what the US wants from us and what European customers want from us. Everybody wants now local manufacturing, which is this whole resilience discussion. China is asking for the same, and given our manufacturing strategy, for us it's relatively easy to follow that. So it doesn't make the world easier. As we said to your first question about the political change in the US, if everything was nicely globalized as it used to be many years ago, it would be easier, but I mean, we know how to adapt to this.
Frau Bergmeier, you're directly competing with their customers, right? That's not an easy task.
I think China is a very important market to us. So there is no way that we don't find a solution for it. We just have announced licensing our Freelander car to our joint venture with Chery, producing a global Freelander in China, right? Then you have to come with new solutions. But definitely there is no way for us to work without China.
I see. One important thing of the last EU Commission was the CHIPS Act and the important projects of common European interest and all the subsidies coming with it. So I'm wondering, is Europe competitive with its funding programs, with its funding landscape?
Yeah, it was certainly a big step in the right direction, right? It's IPCEI, important project of common European interest. We should not forget about that one because it's also more innovation geared. EU CHIPS Act. What of course is required now, continuation, right? One-time effect will not help. Therefore, I'm happy to hear that in Brussels the IPCEI 3 for microelectronics is in discussion. I think that's the right signal. We need to, again, my picture from the beginning, scale and is important. So. And scale is not only relating now to fabs or to revenue, but it's also portfolio breadth and density. And therefore, I can only advocate, let's strengthen the strengths of Europe. So let's build on our common market share here on microcontrollers or on power or on sensors. And let's not go everywhere and try to cover the whole universe of semiconductors. That will not work, but it would be highly appreciated if we continue in that path, that acknowledging the strategic value of semiconductors and to strengthen our strengths in Europe with the given and potentially, hopefully more new players in Europe.
So all of you as a company are investing in Europe, but also in China, Singapore, Malaysia. And I'm wondering, could you give us an idea of what works better there?
There is nothing better. I think the instrument that Europe has put in place, like the EPCI and the direct grants for manufacturing investment, are really efficient. Is point number one. Then point number two, the process of approval is solid and fair, that is preventing a competitor to complain, to say, well, okay, I have seen in Germany this incentive, I have no complaint because we know the process is correct. The problem is at the world level, because the border between country to be competitive, offering grants and incentive, and to be intrusive in order to create some distortion of competition, this is another story. But this I cannot comment, okay? What I have to say, in Europe, the tools are really good, and the process is very solid and very serious. This is what I can say.
Well, look, I mean, we invest actually both in Germany, in Dresden, as much as in, more recently in Singapore. I think the CHIPS Act is was very good. We badly need a CHIPS Act 2.0, and I think the focus should be on innovation. Yes, there are things which are better in Asia. I thought that was the nature of your question. The pool of talent we have access to there is bigger, and the energy cost is lower.
Yeah, I think the energy cost is an interesting point. Yeah. So you mentioned at the beginning the supply chains, how important supply chains are, and so I'm wondering, are customers such as Jaguar Land Rover, are they prepared for resilient supply chains? Is this the case now?
Well, I think we all have a big opinion on this. And I'm very transparent. The OEMs are really strategic about this, and my almost daily experience is that they have learned jointly with the chip industry from this supply crisis and try to put mitigation actions in place which are structural. And yes, a broken supply or a more diversified supply chain is carrying more cost, and they tend to understand that. Not the whole value chain understands that. Other parts of that supply chain are under the pressure of working capital, very tactical now. And my prediction is, and I know I'm live on media here, my prediction is we run in a supply crisis again because of the tactical behavior of several parts of that supply chain. But I also promise that once supply is short again, those who have been acting strategic with us and building on lasting change will be first in queue to receive product.
Frau Bergmeier, how do you behave? You're paying an extra for a resilient supply chain?
As I'm also responsible for procurement with my CPO, it's always too expensive, so do not even ask this. But if it comes to strategic approach, and it's definitely right, so with all the three gentlemen, we have been having on a high level, board level, communications, strategic meetings, technical roadmaps, and we have strategic relationships, and also share our demand for 2 years ahead of schedule. And we every now and then have to check what the tier ones are doing with their demand delivery to our semiconductor suppliers. So I think for us it's really important to have a two-way communication with the semiconductors and the tier one, and not just let the supply chain do their job in order to avoid what you just said. And I believe that's the successful way forward.
By the way, do you ask your suppliers where the products come from, or isn't that on your agenda?
Yeah, we have to. Of course, there's lots of legal necessity where you need to know where the products come from. And if it comes to resilience and geopolitical de-risking, of course you want to know where everyone is producing. That's why I said you need to have an end-to-end digital transparency. Otherwise you cannot handle it because it's super complex and thousands of numbers to be taken care of.
Yeah, I think I agree with Kurt's prediction. Some players have forgotten the lessons learned from the last allocation by and large, not so much the OEMs. We have secured, as I think publicly known, for example, for silicon carbide expansion, 1 billion of prepayments, predominantly from OEMs. So there you see also the commitment from the OEM side. And of course, we will honor those contracts, but it feels like that right now, yeah, the cash man is out.
Jean-Marc, anything you want to add?
No, I confirm exactly what my colleague said, but I would like to add something. When you stack the resilience of the supply chain, the market cycle, the resilience of the supply chain, then the constraints on, let's say, environment, PFAS-free energy, renewable energy, and so on, definitively semiconductor is not an industry for beginner.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I was wondering, whether car manufacturers or tier ones may become competitors because they design their own silicon. Is that something we might see from your point of view?
Again, my two success factors in semiconductors, scale and innovation speed. I think if you embark as a OEM or as a tier one on your own product design, you will feel the topic of scale. Innovation speed, of course, application know-how matters, but at the end of the day, scale in supply chain, scale in portfolio density matters a lot. It's not about to design one product. I think this will be rather the exception, at least on the successful side of things.
Frau Bergmeier, I suppose that is true for you, right? Because you haven't got your own silicon at the moment.
I think we work heavily, as I mentioned previously already. We rather work on technical roadmaps, with these companies. And we also really look into our Tata ecosystem, what benefit of innovation we can get out of it. It's a big ecosystem with also Tata Electronics in it, and that's probably where we try to get what you said several times, scale and speed.
Tata is investing in semiconductors, right? So that's an opportunity for you, if I understood correctly.
Yes.
Okay. But just, so supply chains, what is lacking to make those supply chains really resilient? Sievers, you mentioned that they're not really resilient if they're, so what is lacking?
Well, I think the challenge of the supply chain is the depth of it, because it's not one layer, it's a couple of layers. And in an ideal world, they would be fully synchronized relative to demand signals and supply capability. And that is very hard with every company having a commercial interest across that chain. So that's really hard. I want to just, and I say that with a bit of a smile, it would start with understanding that semiconductors, and Jean-Marc, I built on top of what you said, it's not for beginners. It would start with recognizing that semiconductors are not commodities. I continue to be shocked that the majority of our customers call their purchasing directors commodity directors, which suggests this is a commodity which is just available like this, which sounds simple, but this is the beginning of the understanding where it goes wrong. If you understand that we talk about a very, very complex product, which has a 12 to 20 week manufacturing throughput time, with probably one of the most sophisticated processes in the world, then you wouldn't call it commodity, and you would think a bit more about when and how to order and how to prepare for future capacity swings in both directions. I would have wished that the supply crisis from a few years ago would have brought lessons learned into the whole industry to avoid the pain and the economic damage which we have jointly caused then. So I think it is very feasible to do this, but it would need more attention from all players and transparency across the chain.
Frau Bergmeier, what's the title of your purchasing officer? It's not commodity, I hope.
It's the CPO, and he is here. You can ask him. Buy a glass of wine.
Yeah, good. Well, I'll do that later. But when it comes to asking questions, I would invite you to ask. I've still got lots of questions on the agenda, but I'd ask all of you if anybody has a question, please come forward. And is there anything who wants to? Yeah, over here. Yes, there's someone coming.
Michael Grude, Cologne Chip. Many thanks for this discussion. I want to ask you a question concerning AI. What do you think about non-processor-based neuromorphic AI chips? What will be the future?
You want to take it? Okay. Yeah. It's clear that the current approach of a GPU is not the most efficient one, but it's tremendously successful. And to change this, difficult, not from the hardware side, but from the software stack. You may have heard about the QDAR system of NVIDIA. So I think eventually we will need different architectures. Scaling of the performance and the related power will drive us into limitations, but the hurdle to change to neuromorphic architectures like in-memory computing, analog computing, whatever, is very, very high because it's much less of a hardware challenge than a huge software and ecosystem challenge, but eventually absolutely required.
Yeah, I can confirm that for AI at the edge, I have not spoken about AI in the cloud. On AI at the edge, okay, we are already developing some solution of in-memory computing, but digital. But we do believe that the real future where you will save power is when you move to analog in-memory computing. And we know that there is some memory architecture, sorry to make the marketing, like PCM, are really great for this. And by chance, okay, our microcontroller will be based on PCM embedded memory, but this is by chance. No, it's great. I think it will have a future to have this change of architecture, but I am just commenting on AI at the edge.
All right, thank you. So there's a question over there in the front row.
Hi there. A lot of times the debate over tariffs and controls that are facing the chip industry are kind of looking at the United States and at China. And I'm wondering if you could say, what if you had one wish, or there's one thing that you could have from European governments, or one thing that European governments would not do, what would that be?
Well, I can be very candid. Again, I don't want to give any lesson to government. Okay, it's difficult role, but I give you an example. Okay, ST. Okay, today we are forbidden to make business for digital power. So means inverter or let's say DC-DC converter for power storage with a well-known Chinese company. Okay, that was more well-known for phones and 5G infrastructure. We are simply forbidden to do business with our microcontroller for digital power and for powertrain. This is what I call distortion of competition. So my expectation again is that the European government discuss with the other government in order to establish maybe exportation constraints, yes, or limitation of intellectual properties and so on. This is correct, but maybe it's a dream, but not to create distortion of competition. This is okay what I ask as a candid CEO, okay, to the European authorities.
You want to add something?
Well, I must admit we haven't had real issues with the European government. It's more I think it will be important in a world like we have it now to clearly understand you will not be able to hinder innovation to travel around the world. You can try whatever you want to try. Innovation will conquer the world. And then you better support it in the first place rather than trying to race after it after that. So that is an insight which hopefully is adopted and understood in the first place by, amongst others, the European governments.
Any more questions? There are a couple of questions here. Yeah.
I was in electronica in Shanghai this July, and I saw that there are many companies that today produce and develop the same products that are produced before in the United States or in Europe. And I think this is also the base of success of consumer electronics in China, that have a complete supply chain. So I would like to have an idea from you, what will be the competition with these new actors in the market? Thank you.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of investments going into the semiconductor industry in China, heavily funded. Given the US constraints, mainly on the capacity side, in what they call more mature nodes. However, also a lot of investments going into chip development, still having also access to global foundry capacity. So China is definitely a player in the semiconductor world, and based on their investments, they will make inroads, or they are making inroads into certain product categories. Is it going to be a tsunami? I don't think so. But for sure, we feel that in certain product categories, either again based on local capacities in China, we feel more competition, but also based on chips designed in China, produced in foundries. Now, competition in general is good for the industry because it brings out innovation faster. Of course, it needs to be observed how much that has to do with fair trade, and that is certainly something the political landscape needs to watch, and that ranges not only towards subsidies but also IP topics, which I guess we are aware of. So, but in general, more competition is nothing bad. It's good for industry to stay vital and to innovate faster, as long as it's on a in a fair, more or less fair manner.
Yeah, I would actually say, you mentioned the foundries being built. We are a big user of foundries, and that is a big leverage for us to supply the local industry, because Chinese customers, just like Europeans and US customers, want local supply. So we tap into that quickly building landscape of local foundries in China, which I consider a positive for us, for the product local for local. On the product side, for us, while we are totally paranoid about what comes up in terms of local competition, I must say so far, very, very little. We have very, very little local competition on product designs which are in the fields which are strategic for us. There is a little bit of low-end microcontrollers which are really at the fringe of our interest anyhow, and in all other areas, we don't see them yet. Now, we are not naive. This might change over time, but I consider this as that it is just competition like in other places in the world, and we better make sure we can compete with Chinese in China. It's our job. We talked earlier about the relevance and growing importance of China as a landscape of customers, so we must make sure we are competitive locally.
In the car industry, the competition is already there, right, Frau Bergmeier?
Yes, I think there is not too much to add to Kurt's point, but for us, as we are in the luxurious segment, it might be probably a little bit different to the premium, but still we need to answer what is modern luxury in China, and we need to have a really attractive offer to the customers, otherwise you cannot succeed, right?
So any more questions? Yeah, a couple of questions here? Whoever wants to come first.
So I have two questions, and they may not be politically correct, but politics and technology are joined by the hip. All products need to be either trade compliant or environmentally compliant. So my first question is, with the new administration in the US, the administration may be rogue when it comes to environmentally making products compliant. As we know, previously, the US pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Do you see Elon Musk that may be given a position on this administration as a threat, competition, or co-opetition when it comes to EVs? So that's my first question.
I can simply give you a testimony about, I have seen Elon Musk, he announced his, let's say, robotaxi and his humanoid and other kind of innovation. But I see him pretty focused on what he's doing. And then I guess you have seen the demonstration about the rocket, so SpaceX, the accuracy of the landing. You know that Elon is the CTO of SpaceX, so I think he's pretty focused on what he's doing. Now, about a role in American administration, I don't know, honestly, but I see him very focused.
Okay. My second question is more on the chip side, on the geopolitical risks. So as chip manufacturers, you use manufacturing sites, factories, and fabs in Taiwan. How do you predict if there's a geopolitical risk between China and Taiwan? What is that going to do to your capacity and manufacturing plans?
Well, I think here the whole industry is aware that the capacities which are existing today in Taiwan and that which are also built out further cannot be replaced on any reasonable time frame. They are simply so big that even all the programs or projects which are currently ongoing in US, in Europe, in Japan, are only reducing the exposure a little bit, even though I think it's public that TSMC is even investing still more in Taiwan than on all the other projects which are going on internationally, so outside Taiwan. So I always called, if there is something happening at the Taiwan Strait, it's probably the biggest potential scenario the semiconductor industry and all the downstream industry will face.
So unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Yeah, that's the reason why I'm here. Just one question, just one last question, I think. So should I choose who was the first? I think you were faster than this one. You're the last one. But only one question, please.
Okay, I'll be very brief. The European Union in the Green Deal has identified electronics as a very likely potential contributor to circular economy and suggests reuse on highest level, which is above repair or above recycling. Could you comment on sustainability and circular economy in electronics?
Just short answers, please.
One good example is what I told you a few minutes ago about the batteries passport. Okay, with electronics, okay, you can have a cartography of the battery, and when you resell, okay, the car, okay, you will have a clear understanding about the battery, and you can partially recycle some cell of the battery locally in order, okay, to continue to have the car, okay, classified at a good level. So this is an example, but again, as usual, electronic will be an enabler of this kind of, let's say, kind of economy.
So, we are finally at the end. Give them a big hand for the discussion here. And thank you from my side for answering briefly all the questions from Jan Hofer. Please also give a hand to Jan Hofer for moderating this panel.